Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into one of the most brutal and pivotal moments from the ancient world, Jehu's bloody rise to power, all laid out in the second book of Kings, chapter 10. We're talking about a violent purge that's driven by both prophecy and some serious political ambition. Let's get right into it.
So, let's set the stage. The year is 841 BC, and we're in the northern kingdom of Israel. All the action is going to go down between two key cities, Jezreel and the capital, Samaria. And you have to understand, this is a kingdom that is totally fractured by deep political turmoil and religious conflict. It's all centered on the state-sponsored worship of the god Baal, which was really pushed by the house of the old king, Ahab.
Okay, so here's how we're going to walk through this. We'll start with the prophecy that kicked off all these bloody events. Then we'll get into the executions in Jezreel and Samaria. And finally, we'll look at the shocking public display that cemented Jehu's iron-fisted rule. So the big question is, what on earth drove this incredibly violent purge? It all kicks off in verses 1 through 3. And right away, the story frames Jehu's actions not as just some personal power grab, but as the fulfillment of a divine decree that was made years before. This line right here from verse 10 is the absolute key to understanding this entire chapter. See, it ties Jehu's mission directly back to a prophecy made by the fiery prophet Elijah. Elijah had declared that King Ahab's entire family, his whole bloodline, would be completely cut off as a judgment for his sins, especially for his idolatry and for murdering an innocent man named Naboth. Now, what's really interesting here is the clear line the text draws. As we see later in verse 13, this purge was targeted. Jehu actually spares relatives from the house of Judah because their king was considered righteous. And that highlights a core theme of this whole story: personal and generational accountability. Only the house of Ahab, the guilty party, is in the crosshairs. All right, so with that divine mandate established, we get to the absolute heart of this chapter. And it is just shocking brutality. We see it all play out in verses 6 through 8. This was an act designed to permanently eliminate any future challenge to the throne. 70. According to verse 6, this was the number of King Ahab's sons. Now, after Jehu challenges the leaders of Samaria to basically pick a side and defend the royals, and they immediately surrender, he gives a chilling command: execute them all. This wasn't a random number. 70 meant a complete and total eradication of the royal line. It made sure no one was left who could possibly rise up and claim the throne. You know, to really wrap our heads around something like this, we have to understand this idea of covenant justice. In the ancient Israelite worldview, the whole nation had a covenant, a binding agreement with God. And in the logic of the story, the execution of these 70 sons is seen as the payment for the blood guilt their father Ahab had racked up by breaking that covenant. It's brutal, for sure, but in the context of the narrative, it's a necessary prophetic act. And this timeline, man, it just perfectly illustrates the long game here. As verses 7 and 8 really emphasize, the purge in Jezreel is a direct geographic consequence of a crime that happened in that exact same place a generation earlier: the murder of Naboth for his vineyard. The injustice that happened on Naboth's land is finally avenged, right there, on that same soil. So, okay, the royal family is gone, but Jehu's not done, not by a long shot. As we see in verse 11, his mission gets even bigger. He now targets the entire political and religious system that propped up the house of Ahab. This is about more than just securing a throne. This is about totally reshaping the nation's identity. And to do this, Jehu uses some cunning psychological warfare. This quote from verse 18, this is him announcing a huge sacrifice to Baal. But it's all a trick. It's a brilliant and absolutely ruthless trap designed to lure all of Baal's priests and his most passionate followers into one single place at the exact same time. And once he has them all gathered in Samaria's temple of Baal, the purge is just systematic. Verses 11 through 17 lay it all out. Jehu's forces don't just wipe out the last few remnants of Ahab's family and his allies, they take out the entire priesthood of Baal. By destroying the priests, Jehu isn't just getting rid of a religious threat, he's dismantling the whole institutional and political support system of the old regime. But just eliminating his enemies? That wasn't enough. As we see in verses 8 through 10, Jehu needed to send a powerful public message to the entire kingdom. He had to make an example that nobody would ever forget. This was political theater of the most gruesome kind. The heads of the 70 sons were piled up at the city gate of Jezreel, which was the absolute center of public life. Verse 8 describes how they were left there until morning, a horrifying spectacle for everyone entering or leaving the city to see. The message was impossible to ignore. So, what was the point of all this? I mean, it's not just about being scary. It was a message with a lot of layers. It was a warning, a deterrent, and most importantly, it was physical, tangible proof that the prophecy from verse 10 had come true. It was a very stark lesson. Breaking the covenant has public, undeniable consequences. So when you step back and look at the whole sequence of events, right, across verses 1 through 17, you see this really calculated four-step process. Jehu acts on a divine mandate. He eliminates anyone who could claim the throne. He purges the religious opposition, and then he solidifies his power with that public display. His zeal is shown as the engine that fulfills prophecy, while at the same time it methodically secures his own absolute political power.
And the story, as we see in verses 10 and 17, just ties a bow on the whole thing. It explicitly states that the word of the Lord has been fulfilled, right down to the letter. Jehu's violent, ruthless campaign is framed, from beginning to end, as an act of divinely sanctioned obedience.
And that leaves us with a really tough and lingering question, doesn't it? The text presents all of this as the precise execution of God's word. And it forces us as readers to wrestle with a story where brutal, calculated violence is completely intertwined with divine will. It's a stark reminder of just how complex these ancient texts can be, and it really challenges us to ask, where does divine justice end and human brutality begin?